And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, Indiana loses to Nebraska 70-60. It is a night that was set up to be a celebration of four seniors, especially Will Sheehy and everything he has meant to the program for the last 4 years. And unfortunately, it took on something of a somber note with the team's performance. This was a game that Nebraska came out, took control early, really never relinquished it outside of a short spurt there in the second half when Indiana was able to tie it. But Nebraska was able to quickly get the lead back. They never gave it up, and the Hoosiers fall. And really, whatever slim NCAA tournament hopes we were all still clinging to heading into this game, they hinged on sweeping this three-game homestand, going in on Saturday against Michigan and doing something, and that clearly is no longer going to happen. Indiana won the two against the ranked teams, lost the one against the unranked team, which makes about as much sense as the rest of the season has for the Hoosiers. But anyway, we're here to break it down. Andy Bottoms will be here, Ryan Phillips will be here, and I'm here. And so we will talk about this game, and in the spirit of Will Sheehy's senior speech, we'll probably keep it pretty short and sweet. We won't belabor it too much. To kick things off for me, I guess I just want to talk about one positive that I took from tonight's game, which was the play of Troy Williams. I thought in a game where a lot of guys had up and down performances, Troy was the one guy who was pretty consistently productive. He would knock down a couple of threes. He was hustling. He got rebounds. I tweeted out in the second half, tonight is the night Troy Williams became a man. And really that was, and he did have some turnovers and he was taken out for defense because his attention still lapses there sometimes. But, in a season like this where things aren't going well, we have to look for some of those smaller signs of growth. And I thought tonight was really one of Troy's finer moments. And when Indiana needed plays to be made to keep them in the ball game, I thought Troy really made them and really did a nice job. So that's the one positive. Unfortunately, there's a lot of negative, and we'll probably spend most of the rest of the show talking about that. And so to kick us off here, let's go around the horn. Andy, give us your bottoms line, and then Ryan, feel free to rant away on another disappointing IU loss.
Yeah, it was an odd game. It felt like I commented on this in the first half that it felt like the opposite of the other Nebraska game, where in that game IU, even though they were up 13 or whatever it was at the half, felt like they should have been up more. I thought for most of the first half tonight they really could have been down more, and even in the beginning of the second half it seemed like they came out with a little bit better energy, but still couldn't really chip away very much at the lead, and just hung around and really started to make you feel like, all right, they're going to hang around long enough that they're finally going to get over the hump, and they just never could. And a lot of that credit goes to Nebraska. It seemed like every time they needed a big play, they got one, whether it was Shields or Pitchford at various points, really coming up with a key rebound or making a key basket, and so give credit to those guys, but certainly a disappointing performance after the last couple games, and obviously not having Vonleh was big. No different than it was against Ohio State, but IU just really couldn't get stops when they needed to. I think the offense was really bad at the beginning and really bad at the end, and in the middle, did some nice things with trying to find ways to get to the basket and some of that. But I thought defensively they struggled, more often than not. Even some of the misses that Nebraska had felt like they were open, and I thought it was another game where off the dribble in particular really struggled to stay in front of guys and gave up too many baskets that way. So disappointing loss to the three-game homestand, given how the other ones had gone, but like you said, kind of fits for this season. Beat Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Ohio State at home, and lost to Nebraska, Penn State, and Northwestern. So that's about as odd as it gets when you look at balance of how things have gone for the season. So I guess if you look at just the home slate and the Big Ten schedule, it's a pretty fair representation of how things have been overall.
Yeah, from my perspective, I thought the biggest story, other than Vonleh, of course, missing another game, was I thought Yogi was just off all night, and it's one of those games where, he just wasn't hitting his shots. He was certainly working hard and playing hard. The shots weren't falling, and that happens sometimes. But frankly, when you're without a guy like Noah Vonleh, who can, at times step up and carry you when your best player's not playing up to par, It's not a game you can have a game off, and it's just unfortunate that that he had a rare off game a night when Vonleh couldn't go. Because the combination of Vonleh, Will Sheehy, and Troy Williams having a big night probably could have made up for Yogi hitting 1 of 10 from 3 and 4 of 14 from the field, and only getting to the line for 2 free throws. So if Vonleh had been in there, you might be able to make up for that. But on a night like tonight, where he's out and the offense was struggling at times all year, we've been able to rely on Yogi to sort of hit a shot to keep things going and keep things flowing, get the crowd back into it. And he was just off tonight. And, you can be upset about it, but, off games happen. And some nights shots don't fall. It's happened to the best shooters in basketball. So it was a tough night for him, and I thought that really made the difference in the game when it came down to it.
The Vonleh injury is really strange to me, and I don't want to speculate about it too much because we don't know that much information. We just know he's got an inflamed foot. It sounds like it's been something that he's been dealing with for a while. And earlier in the day, it looked like he was going to play. And listening to Tom Crean's comments in the pregame with Don Fisher, I sensed a hint of frustration that Noah wasn't going to play, and it sounded like even as close to game time as the shoot-around, they thought he was going to play. And so, and Crean just seemed like he didn't quite know what the reason was. And so I don't know if his frustration was just general frustration or frustration with the medical staff or whatever. I don't know, but I got that sense from him, and I guess we'll just have to watch and see how that plays out. I should let you know if you're listening live and you want to ask us a question, tweet it with the hashtag AssemblyCall. You can also go to the YouTube page where we're streaming live and leave a question there. We'll be able to address it here in a little bit. And actually, while you guys were talking, I did think of another positive, and so I want to get to that before we dwell any more on the negatives. And Andy, I'll go to you. I thought Devin Davis did some really nice things tonight. And when I heard that Noah was going to be out, I tweeted, expect another big game from Hunter Perea. Wouldn't be shocked by a double-double. Clearly, I forgot about the fact that, when young guys have a good game one night, they usually don't do it again the next night with this squad. But fortunately, Devin Davis was able to pick up some of that slack, and I thought in the second half was really active. I think he finished with 7 points. He had 3 boards. Really just did some good Devin Davis things tonight. Played within himself. Did he turn the ball over? Yeah, he didn't have any turnovers. So, it was really for him about as well as he can play. And so, and I guess, that if we talk about the positives from this game, I thought really they're late. Yogi was struggling with a shot. Once the game got bogged down in the half court, Will was really struggling to get good looks. And I really thought for a stretch there, between maybe like the 5-minute mark and the 2.5-minute mark when Indiana still kind of had a chance, the freshmen were kind of leading them. Stan was getting in the lane, and even though he didn't make shots, and Devin was getting some hustle plays, and Troy had that nice finger roll to kind of keep things alive. So I thought the play of those guys was at least a positive, and Devin Davis specifically. Andy?
Yeah, with Davis, I just got done. I was finishing up because the game actually, listening to the speeches, the stats came out early. I was trying to finish up some of the lineup stuff before we got going. He was one of the only guys with a positive plus-minus, which was kind of odd for me because when he first came in the game, he seemed really shaky, and then he kind of made a basket and then seemed like that really settled him down. But initially when he came in, he seemed to be overwhelmed, might not be the right word, but it seemed like he was a little bit kind of flustered by the situation. But he really kind of settled down and did play a nice job. And so I thought gave good contributions. I know we also had a couple messages going back and forth about Perea. And apparently he played close to 10 minutes in the first half, and I wouldn't have thought that at all. And I think your comment was, well, that seems fitting since he didn't really seem to do anything, and he was on the floor that long and really was not noticed. It definitely felt like a game where, especially Nebraska's got a little bit of size, although their big guys are a little bit more mobile. It felt like a game where he could have been successful. Didn't really get a lot of touches in the post like he. Like he did at times against Ohio State, and I don't know if that kind of frustrated him, got him out of the game. I'm not really sure, but I didn't think he was, didn't seem as into the game as he was against Ohio State, and I'm not sure what led to that, whether it was the matchup or whatever else. But, I think Davis, some of those things, he shows you what he's going to be able to do, and depending on what this team looks like next year, they're going to need more of that. They're going to need some kind of presence up front, and even though he's undersized, he tends to, play with a lot of effort and physicality, and so I think hopefully a good building block for him as we look forward to the last few games of the season, and then into his sophomore year.
And Andy, I do. We're going to have to talk about Tom Crean at some point in the show, obviously, because I thought he made some very shaky decisions late. So you can kind of get your critiques prepared, because we'll go to that next. But Ryan, obviously, we have to talk about Will Sheehy, because I mean this is his night, and obviously the loss has somewhat overshadowed that. I do real quick, if you haven't listened to the podcast at Inside the Hall about Will Sheehy, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do that and got interviews with Marnie Mooney, with Jordan Hulls, with Chronic Hoosier, with Jeremy Gray. Definitely take a listen to that, because what they all say about Will, it really kind of colors in some of a lot like kind of what Tom Crean said about him. Just his legacy, his impact on the program. If you go to InsideTheHall.com, you'll be able to see that. But Ryan, let's get your thoughts on Will. I mean, obviously, he would have liked to have a better game tonight, and you could tell just watching him listen to the other speeches. And I think his speech lasted 48 seconds. He was very disappointed after the game. He hates to lose, as we know. And unfortunately, he was never. He had that stretch there in the second half where he and Yogi got hot and made a few threes. But I thought he really struggled in the second half to get going. Some of the shots weren't falling. This game certainly wasn't as outstanding as the games against Iowa and Ohio State were. What did you think of his overall game tonight? And this is the last Big Ten home game where you're going to have a chance to critique him. So I don't know how that makes you feel.
I feel like I'm going to be giving away a little piece of myself at the end of the season. No, I thought at times tonight Will was pressing. But I think that was also a symptom of the team struggling, and so. Of course, your senior leader is going to try and sometimes maybe do too much when you might want to dial it back a little bit and just use your movement and things like that instead of one-on-one ability. Use movement off of screens and things like that to open the offense up. But, he was 5 of 14 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3, grabbed 4 rebounds, only had 1 turnover, but he finished with 13 points, but he played 38 minutes. It was clear, you could tell in that second half it was going to take a team of guys to pull him off the floor. And that's what we've come to expect from Will. He's a guy who goes hard all the time. We can question, and I certainly have, decisions he's made with the ball, shots he's taken, things like that. But you can never question his heart and how hard he plays and his effort and how much he cares. And you can tell he hates losing. And I think that was the reason why tonight his senior night speech was so short. He just, did not look pleased to be there. And I'm sure that's not how he wanted his last regular season home game, at least, to go. It's a bummer for Will to lose the game. But the guy he's meant so much to the program, and I think that it's good that during the second half of his senior season, people have started to sort of realize how important he was to the turnaround of the program. A guy like Oladipo and Zeller and even Yogi and Jordan Hulls get a lot of credit for choosing IU when it was in a bad situation and things like that. Well, Will did that too, and he had interest from other programs, but Indiana went after him hard, and he decided that's what his best fit was. And when he stepped on campus, from the day he stepped on campus till now, he's never made anyone regret that decision. So, good for him. He's had a great career, and it'll be sad to see him go.
It really will be, and I think as I talked with Chronic Hoosier about, I get the sense that some people may be underestimating what we lose with him not being here next year. He is kind of that link to, when the program was down, and he and Victor had such an impact on that culture change. And and Will has always been a guy whose impact has gone beyond the box score. And so I think you can look at maybe, you can replace his points. We'll be able to replace some of that stuff, but we saw a leadership void this year just after losing the guys we lost last year, and obviously someone's going to have to step up and fill that void. Great comment came in here from Pam Hegner, one of our most loyal listeners. Says, Crean's intro to Sheehy hit me hard because he is the quintessential player that we hope to obtain, and it hurts to see him go, especially during this turbulent season. I really hate to imagine he won't play another NCAA tourney. I'd love to see Will come back and coach. Seems that might be his calling. A lot of people think that. We'll see. If that's something that is in his future. Before we move on, either you guys have any more thoughts on Will that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was living in Bloomington when well, until recently, actually, a couple years, about a year and a half ago. But I was there when Will and Victor came onto campus, and people sort of plugged in with the basketball program and sort of who followed it really closely and knew what was going on. We heard just ridiculous, almost legendary stories about their workouts, and this is before they had ever played a game. This was, as Kareen was talking about, it was that summer, and we were just hearing that these guys were like living in Cook Hall, and just their workouts were just incredible and insane. And I remember some video escaped of one of them just dunking and all this stuff before anybody really knew who they were, and that continued. And then the summer before their junior year, we heard even more stories about Victor's workouts, and then it obviously showed on the court. And I think that for the future of this program, Coach Crean and the assistants can hold up these two guys as, this is what happens when you work hard. Because those guys came in as athletes and they left as basketball players. I mean, that doesn't always happen. In fact, it's pretty rare. A lot of times you're just an athletic guy who can do some stuff on the floor. I mean, these guys left as basketball players, well-rounded, guys who didn't just work hard. They translated that to the court, and it's rare. And I just really think that Will and Victor are the two guys that our coaching staff can hold up as player development examples to kids who want to come here.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it was, obviously, a disappointment for him, and I'm curious to know how his speech might have been different had they won. But I think you could tell it was just the last place he wanted to be was standing there talking about things after the game, and to a certain extent, after everything everybody said about him, you really can't blame him. I think. There's a lot of different memories of him to choose from over the course of time. The shot against VCU is the one that sticks out for me. A couple, big dunks, the flexing against Purdue, whatever you want to say. There's a lot of good moments that he's really been a part of as the program's come back. And I think, one of the things that I really took away, Jared, from what you did for kind of the tribute to him was nothing to do with basketball, with just all the positive comments about how he would go out of his way to help other people and talk to fans and do things like that. And he's certainly not the only guy on the IU team that does that. He's certainly not the only guy in college basketball that does that. But I think one of the cool things that has been kind of a theme with so many of these guys who have been there is the program has kind of come back. And I know that's the term that everybody can kind of debate what that really means, but I think one of the the common threads is that these are all good guys and people that we should all be happy to represent the university both on and off the court. So definitely thought it was a good tribute that you helped put together with the help of all the folks that you mentioned, and definitely a guy that will be missed in so many ways for this team, and a huge void for somebody to try and pick up next year, and probably to a point where it's not going to be one person, it's going to need to be a lot of guys.
And I actually thought one of the best comments in that, kind of end with this, that we ended that podcast with, was it was before the season. They were asking Will, what advice would he impart on the young guys? And they said, hey, you're in a small town of Bloomington. Just know that people are always watching you, and represent the university well. And I thought it was a very interesting perspective, and that's what he did. He represented the university well, and just the ultimate Hoosier. And so, certainly this season may have been a disappointment, but his career overall was just a tremendous triumph, and I think far better than anybody would have expected when you take into account just the overall impact. Okay, now, so we go from one of Tom Crean's great decisions, which is offering a scholarship to Will Sheehy, when other people, at a big program might not have. Let's talk about some maybe less than stellar decisions that Tom Crean made tonight, Andy, because I thought at the end of the game, it was even. I think Nebraska was they were up 59-55, but Indiana cut it to 3, and there were some opportunities there. I thought at the end of the game, Tim Miles coached circles around Tom Crean in a lot of different ways. I thought Indiana, there were a few possessions where we just wasted 10 seconds not knowing what to do, and then we'd take a timeout and try and figure it out. And, there was one play, I think, with about a minute and a half left, and Tom Crean sent Jeff Howard in for a defensive sub, and the ball went out of bounds, and so Crean kind of got caught because then Howard had to come in. But then there was a timeout where he could have obviously made the sub back to get Howard out of there and didn't, and I thought that was a big missed opportunity. That might have been the play where Troy Williams bailed him out. I'm not sure. But then, taking 6-7 seconds to decide to foul, and I just thought the management of the game at the end, inability to get shots, wasting time, some questionable substitution decisions. I mean, there was a stretch there where the only way we were getting anything close to the basket was Stan Robinson taking it in. And I know he missed a couple of those easy looks, but we weren't getting looks otherwise. And then Stan goes out. So, again, I just thought at the end of the game, a lot of curious decisions. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought the same thing, and it was funny because I really felt like up to that point, the first half I felt like it was kind of, there weren't a ton of lineups used. Like I said, I got most of this done, and if you look back at the first half, they used excuse me, nine lineups. 6 of those they played at least a minute and a half, and nobody was the best. Anybody was just +2. I mean, it just couldn't really find a good combination for some of those reasons. And then in the second half, it was funny, and I haven't looked to compare this to other stretches in Big Ten play, although I'm relatively confident in saying that when the group of Davis, Farrell, Gordon, Robinson, and Sheehy played together, they were +9. They played together for 8 minutes and 11 seconds straight. I'm almost positive that's the longest stretch any single group has played together over the course of the season, and was one of the best plus-minus numbers in that over that period of time. I think second only to the one from the Ohio State game where they were +14. And so I thought that was great. And then it seemed like as soon as that group got broken up, which is reasonable at that point, they've played 8 minutes. Then, like Ryan said, it would have taken probably the National Guard to get Sheehy out of the game at that stretch. But they really struggled at that point to try to get anything together. Brought Hollowell and Williams in then, and definitely Davis came back in about a minute later. But that group never played together again until the last 20 seconds of the game, when it really didn't make any difference. And I definitely thought, the Howard thing, while it's great that he, gives great effort, they just at that point couldn't really stand to have him out there as an option on the floor, because you also had Devin Davis out there who they're really not going to run plays for in that scenario. He might be able to get a putback here and there, but so you've kind of got 2 guys on the inside who they're really not going to, it's tough to make the defense account for. And I thought the same thing you did with Robinson. I mean, at a time when the offense was just standing around and really struggled against the zone, which seemed odd to me because I thought they had some decent possessions against the zone at other points in the game. And but they really struggled down the stretch, and Robinson was really the only guy breaking people down. And yeah, it wasn't great that he missed a couple shots in close, but to me, nobody else really seemed able to do much at that point. And at the very least, him, getting in the lane off the dribble might be able to set somebody up here in that regard. So yeah, for as good as I thought the rest of the game was, I thought it was questionable. And the other thing, to kind of jump back a little bit, was bringing Williams in that stage. We've all talked about how it was a great game from him, but he still had lapses defensively. And Miles called the timeout. It was 59-58 with 2.5 minutes left after Davis had made a layup. And Williams was already in the game at that point. Tim Miles takes a timeout, and then he puts in Pitchford. And I thought, if anything, there's maybe where you go. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to sit here and say this now, but I did think at the time, maybe it wasn't Howard, but it seemed like, do you really want to get a point here where Williams is the guy that you're counting on in some kind of defensive situation? And they ran, some screens with some ball screens with Pitchford and Petaway, and IU had really been switching almost everything pretty much the whole half, especially when they went to that small lineup. And Robinson goes to switch off of. They'd switched once. Robinson got on to Pitchford, and he tried to get position inside, couldn't do it. Came back out, set another screen, and then Williams went with Petaway as he went around the screen, and leaves Pitchford wide open for a 3 that puts the lead back up to 4. And I don't think IU ever got closer than that the rest of the game. So I thought it was kind of illustrative of both points you made of Miles making a good decision to get Pitchford back in and kind of finding ways to get him involved, and Crean not taking a chance there to take Williams out in a situation where he's been a liability lately over the latter part of the season, and really over large parts of the season. So I definitely thought the late game stuff was concerning and odd, given that I really like the move to the small lineup and what they were able to do with that group. So kind of a roller coaster performance for Crean in the same way that it really was for the team.
And here's a question from Chris Olson. How do you explain only 24 minutes for Troy tonight? Seemed like he sat for a long time in the middle of the second half and lost momentum. And Andy, I think you kind of hit on that right there. And let's cover this, because Troy, for all the good things that he does, he gets lost an awful lot on defense, and he's not very good at keeping his man in front of him. And so he's able to make up for some of that with, just a lot of hustle, and I think he's doing a lot more little things now. He's, getting rebounds, and he's getting steals, and he's being more productive on offense and kind of playing within himself. But those defensive liabilities really make it hard for him to be a guy that's playing, more than 23, 24 minutes. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'll let Ryan jump in and cover most of this. He really sat, almost the only part of the second half he sat was during that stretch, and I think it was a case where, that group was playing really well together, and over the course of the season, everybody's really complaining that why are you taking these guys out when they're playing well? So I didn't really, while he was obviously playing really well and hit, 2 threes in a game, he hadn't hit, I think he'd hit one since early December coming into the game, and, those things were great, and I thought he played with a lot of effort and really gave a good spark to begin the half, but I didn't necessarily have an issue with not playing him during that stretch because that group was playing really well together. On the flip side, I can see where, he went and sat for a long time and was out of the flow of the game, but I can't sit here and be somebody who said Crean should be riding some of these hotter lineups all season and then say he's an idiot now for sticking with the group that was playing really well. So I'll kind of go with what I've been saying all year and kind of back him on leaving that group in for a while. I did think it was probably a struggle for Troy at that point because he seems to be one that plays a little bit better the longer he's in the game, which I think was just ultimately not a great combination, but not sure I put all the blame for that on Crean.
Yeah, the thing with Troy and his defense, it's not a lack of effort, and it's not a lack of athleticism or any of that or quickness. It's all technique and footwork, and his feet are often he just finds himself out of position with his footwork, and he closes out a little too hard on guys and gets dribbled by, or gets too focused on his man and not the stuff around him and the screens coming and things like that. So it's stuff that can be fixed. I don't think he's going to be a terrible defender for his entire career, and I think he's an okay defender. He's just really having a tough stretch of the season. I don't think he's been great this year, but I think it's going a little too far to categorize him as just a complete waste defensively. But I think that he definitely has a lot of places to improve, and I think it's all technique and it's stuff that can be learned and taught. And so I think that you'll see him gradually get better as a defender, but it's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of hard work because it's just stuff that he's probably his entire life growing up playing basketball, he's been the most athletic, fastest guy, and nobody can go by him because he's so quick to recover when he makes a mistake with his technique. And now he's facing guys that can expose him. So yeah, I think that this is just the kind of thing where he's just going to have to continue to develop and get better. I think his technique defensively and his jump shot are two things that he really has to work on this offseason.
And Andy, you brought up an interesting stat in the chat that Troy was minus 14 for the game. And again, plus-minus numbers in a single game don't always tell you everything, but it does at least show that in a game like today, the team was more productive when Troy was not on the floor. Some interesting comments coming out in the post-game press conference. Evan Hooper of the IDS quoting Tom Crean saying, "Bottom line is we did not shoot well enough tonight." Crimson Cast was quick to retweet that with, "Really, that was the bottom line," is the question. Let me ask you something, Andy, and let me just play devil's advocate for a moment, because you look at some of the numbers, and rebounding was close to even. Indiana did have 11 assists on 22 made field goals. So, a 50% assist rate, which has been predictive of success for Indiana. They had a greater than 1 assist to turnover ratio, limiting it to only 10 turnovers. And Indiana shot horribly. 22 of 60. They were 5 of 21 from downtown, and some of those looks were good looks. Stan missed a couple of good looks. We missed a couple of layups early. Yogi missed some threes that he typically makes, and in a home game, you expect to shoot better than that, and certainly we have the last couple games. Andy, what do you think when you hear a comment like that from Tom Crean? Because clearly we didn't shoot well enough, and clearly if just a few of those shots go, it's a totally different game, all else being equal. At the same time, for some reason as fans, we also don't like hearing that as the excuse. So what do you kind of take from a comment like that?
Yeah, I mean, I see both sides of it. I guess what I would say is, I mean, rarely do you win a game where you don't shoot well, so I'm not sure that that can be the bottom line in any game. I thought in a lot of cases the shots they took weren't necessarily the right ones. I mean, if you look at a 60 field goal attempts, IU shot 21 threes, and much to the dismay of many fans, including myself, none of those really came down the stretch in the last few seconds, the last minute when they really needed to shoot them. So I thought that was, situations where they really bailed Nebraska out in some of those cases, and some of that is Nebraska really just, daring guys to shoot and really trying to close off driving lanes. But IU did have success in the second half, particularly when they went on that run, really being aggressive and going toward the basket, and that set up a couple three-pointers, but it was more working from the inside out as opposed to the other way around. So, yeah, you didn't make shots, but I would also argue that the shots they took were not high percentage shots based on the way that this team has shot the ball over the course of the season, and I think that is probably what stands out to me is that, I realize Noah's out, but 21 three-pointers for this team, the way they've shot over the majority of the season, just felt like a lot, especially because it wasn't a case of, oh, well, they hit the first couple and then it seemed like, they fell in love with the three. I mean, you take Troy Williams out. Now, who would have ever thought I would have said this? You take his 2 for 2 out. The rest of the guys are 3 for 19. You just, to me, that was just not a good shot mix and things like that. And like I said, I thought at times early in the game against the zone, I thought, there was one possession where 2 different guys actually flashed to the middle of the zone, and I, jokingly, hashtag that as progress, but it really was, and it felt like it. And then it seemed like when Nebraska went back into that toward the end of the game, IU either lost sight of that or just wasn't getting the same looks. And I think Nebraska did a really good job. I think Yogi mentioned this in some of the comments I've seen. They were really, kind of trapping him off of ball screens and making him give the ball up, which, is the right thing to do. They're willing to make somebody else beat him. And even though Yogi was having a little bit of an off shooting night, or a lot bit of an off shooting night, I guess, he was still a guy that they didn't really want to get loose.
In the first game against Nebraska, we banked in 2 threes in the first half, and in this game, Troy Williams made 2 threes. So apparently just crazy things happen with three-pointers when we're playing Nebraska. Ryan, you had something that you wanted to add there just regarding the whole we didn't shoot well defense.
Yeah, frankly, I mean, he's right. You hit 36% of your shots in the Big Ten, you're going to lose. Like, I'm sorry, you hit 23% from three-point range, you're going to lose. Now, were there other things they could have done? Yeah, but, the players are the ones taking those shots. And look, Yogi's 10 three-pointers, I had a problem with maybe 2 of those. He usually makes most of those shots he took. If he shoots his normal percentage, he's 4 of 10, and that's 3 more points. That's 3 more threes. I mean, again, it's not the only reason, but that's a huge reason we lost is we didn't hit shots. I mean, at some point, you've got to make shots. I mean, you have to score to win. I don't understand people's problem because Crean has said that before in games. Bottom line, you have to make shots, and you do have to make shots. Like I don't understand. People always freak out about that. I mean, you're not going to get a layup every single time. You're going to get mid-range jumpers. You're going to get, Nebraska ran a zone. I thought they played a very solid zone and forced IU away from the basket. Now, IU doesn't play in a vacuum. I mean, they have to go with what the defense is giving them and try and attack it, of course. But how many times did they miss shots inside the paint, relatively close? I mean, Troy Williams had one at the end that was just a floater. I was like, okay, yeah, that's 2 points, and he missed it. You had other guys just getting close and just, not get a solid shot. And it, at some point, it's a combination of things. Yeah, they didn't shoot well. They also didn't have great shot selection. And again, when you do that, yeah, you're going to lose. You shoot 36% in the Big Ten. I'm sorry, you're going to lose. That's just, that's the way it goes. 99% of the time you're going to lose that game.
Right, but I think you can't just throw your hands up and just say, well, we didn't shoot well, because a lot goes into shooting well.
Right.
Like you said, shot selection is part of it. The ability of your offense to generate good shots, getting the right proportion of threes, like Andy was saying. For a team like this, taking more than 33% of your shots from three-point range isn't a good mix. So
right, but 10 of those were Yogi. And he's a good three-point shooter. And I like I said, I had a problem with maybe 2 of those. So he would have had 8 three-point attempts and made 1 of them. if he took the ones that I thought were good takes. What I'm saying is that, like, people I think overreact to a comment like that. He could also mean, yeah, we didn't make shots, we didn't shoot the ball well. I mean, it could also mean our shot selection sucked. I mean, it's a combination of things. But when you look at the percentage, I mean, yeah, regardless of anything, if you only make 36% of your shots, you're going to lose. And again, a guy like Will Sheehy took 14 shots, and a lot of those were relatively okay shots, and they just didn't go in. And some nights that happens. I don't think that's the only reason we lost, but I thought if I had to single out one thing, it wasn't turnovers. We only had 10 turnovers. We out-rebounded them. We shot 64% from the 64.7% from the free throw line. You make those, you're back in it a little closer. I mean, so yeah, there were problems. The switching on screens at the end in key situations was bad, but if I had to pinpoint one thing, it was, we didn't make shots.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only kind of two things that jump in on, the one with Yogi, I think, while I don't know that I had issues with a lot of the shots either, I do think there were cases where I think we talked about earlier, he ended up with 2 free throws that maybe there were opportunities that he could drive a little bit more. And again, Nebraska really tried to take that away and double team him a bit more. So not a huge issue there, but I do think, there's certain nights, no matter how good of a shooter you are, things might not be falling, and maybe a different approach is needed. He had a nice mid-range shot at one point in the first half, and so maybe trying to do something different. And I think the other thing with the comment is, I think right or wrong, people view all this stuff is under a microscope, and I think it's all viewed in the context of other kind of post-game quotes and all that other stuff. And it's like, well, no kidding, they didn't make shots. I think it's also but it almost feels like I really don't know what it was, or like an easy answer to, well, most, you can come out and say that after most games that you lose, like, we didn't make shots, and it, for games when there might have been other things, and it was like, you don't really know. There certainly have been times when players have been singled out about different things that they did or didn't do, and then now it's kind of like the generic, oh, we missed shots. So I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like I'm reading a ton into it, but I do see how that can be frustrating, because it feels like I didn't know what the answer was, so I'm blaming something obvious that we didn't make shots. I think that's how people are interpreting it. I don't know that that's how I'm interpreting it, but I see how people could when kind of viewed in the, in comparison to other comments made after the game. But
no, I get it. I mean,
it's hard to argue they didn't make shots when you shoot that poorly. But
I mean, yeah,
so technically he's not wrong. But
I mean, yeah, no, I just think that it's another one of those things where people just jump on everything he says after a loss and just magnify it and blow it out of proportion. When frankly, he's right. They didn't make shots. I mean, I don't. Again, whether that's a problem with the offense, whether that's a problem, he's not saying that, well, this is all on the players because they didn't shoot well. He's saying, yeah, we didn't make shots. I mean, he's not saying, blaming anybody else. He's just saying we didn't make shots, and they didn't make shots, and maybe that means he's got to get them in a better position to make shots. But it's one of those things where immediately people are like, just jump all over it. As I mean, look, it's Indiana fans. I've had a long relationship with Indiana fans who love to overreact to things, and so I'm not exactly surprised. But it's just hilarious. I mean, that was a bad game for a lot of reasons. But I mean, if I had to point to one, I'd say the fact that they just didn't shoot well.
Well, and again, we may be burying the lead here. I mean, I think defense was almost as big a problem as the offense. I mean, Nebraska ends up with 1.14 points per possession, and there were long stretches of the game where they were getting any shot that they wanted. We were leaving shooters open who we shouldn't have been. The communication seemed poor. We've seen this team game plan so well defensively, like in the Michigan game, and it seemed like, we didn't quite have that tonight. I mean, Teran Petaway did not have a vintage game. He sat for a lot of the second half with foul trouble, but yet, this defense that at times has looked so much better tonight, just really didn't. Ryan, you want to jump in here as far as the defense goes?
Yeah, I think Vonleh missing was gigantic defensively in this game. We managed to keep Ohio State out of the middle for significant portions of the game, but and I thought that was because Perea had such a nice game and Hollowell as well, but there was no defensive presence in the middle, and there was no eraser back there, and Nebraska knew it and attacked accordingly. And the key to having a big guy like Vonleh is when a guy drives, it's always in the back of his head that this shot could get altered or something happened. But they knew there was nobody back there, and they drove with confidence. And I think that even when they didn't get to the hoop, other guys had to collapse, and that opened things up on the outside. And it was just, he was a very glaring omission today. He just did not, having him not back there just was huge. And I thought that Nebraska took advantage, to their credit. And so I think that was a big part of what the defense was missing. Because especially, again, they scored 70 points, and you look at the numbers. I mean, they shot 19 free throws, which is, high but not absurd. And they only had 6 assists, which means that there was a lot of scoring off of drives. And also, we only had 10 turnovers, so it wasn't like they were getting a ton of transition baskets. So, I thought that Vonleh missing was huge defensively tonight, whereas I thought they dealt well with it against Ohio State.
And Andy, you want to jump in real quick on the defense? Andy, unmute yourself, please. All right, Andy.
All right, I will think about it, and then I will decide. No, so I thought I already had, but whatever. I had a lapse in the same way that we had lapses on defense.
Yes.
I think that's really what I would have pointed to as a defense. I didn't really say that last, but you look at Nebraska from an efficiency standpoint, 1.13, actually 1.14 points per possession. I mean, coming into the game, I'm not sure what they were at. I'll try to look it up here while I'm talking, but they're not a great offensive team. They've really done their best work by playing well on defense and kind of limiting possessions and doing things like that in the game. I mean, that's a lot of both points and just points per possession to give up to a team that's really struggled. I mean, for the year in conference play, they're 10th, and I think it's coming into this game 10th in offensive efficiency on Pomeroy, and to give up basically 0.15 points per possession more than what they've experienced during the season. I think that does speak to some defensive issues. I think some of that was, allowing people to get in the lane and not having that eraser. But a lot of times they really weren't even, they were looking to pitch it back out to guys who could, make threes. Gallegos, I said at one point, he made those 2 threes in a row. Big stretch in the second half. I mean, the guy's taking 75% of his shots on the three-point line. So, he's really not venturing inside the three-point line. Pitchford's kind of the same way. For a big guy, really, really is willing to, stand out there and shoot threes, and that's really what he wants to do. I thought they gave him a lot of clean looks as well, and I know that's sometimes odd to see a big guy that wants to do that and hard defense, but I thought really, even as poorly as they shot the ball tonight, I thought good defense would have allowed them to at least come closer and potentially overcome it. And I thought it was just a poor defensive effort against a team that has really struggled to score. And I thought that ultimately was the difference, more so than the bad shooting, although obviously, shooting the ball well cures a lot of ills, but I would still say that, the big thing was the defense.
Other important stats from the night. Evan Hoopfer just tweeted out how long each senior's speech was. Taylor Ware, 9 minutes and 32 seconds. Will Sheehy, 48 seconds. The definition of short and sweet. And so in honor of Will, we're going to go to our final thoughts because, frankly, I don't know if there's a whole lot more to talk about with this game. And obviously we've got the Michigan game coming up on Saturday, but having lost this game, and we were already far from the bubble. Now we're even further away from it to where it's just ridiculous to really even mention. So that game, of course, it means something because it's a Big Ten game, but what it might have meant, it no longer does. So don't think we'll go into a big breakdown or preview of Michigan. So let's go with some final thoughts. Ryan, you can lead us off, then Andy, and I'll close it out.
Just a tough way for Will Sheehy to, and Jeff Howard and Taylor Ware, for them to finish off their last regular season home game. Just a tough loss. Again, we didn't make shots. While also, the defense did have lapses at times, and it's a step back from the last couple wins, which I thought were 2 of the better wins of the season, and really showed some growth and maturity in this team that we hadn't seen for much of the year. Again, all of this is building towards next year. I mean, that's what we've been saying since December. Is this is going to be an up and down year, and we're going to be we've got to focus on where this team's going, not where they are. And so it's a step back tonight. in the grand scheme of things. Hopefully, it's something they can learn from and improve and use it to get better.
Yeah, I mean, for me, kind of like I said, this was a disappointing, albeit not surprising outcome. I think as you sat back and looked, and um, you could really see this team, get up for some of these bigger games, and this was a big game, but for whatever reason, I didn't really have a great feeling about it. Just the way that Nebraska's generally played, other than slipping up at Illinois, they've been pretty tough lately, and it sounds sad to say that I didn't have a great deal of confidence even coming off of those wins for this game. It just felt like this was the kind of game so far this season that this team hasn't performed well in, and that certainly was the case tonight. I just thought, some of the things that they did well from a ball movement standpoint and some of these other games kind of went away, and I think it's just, more of the inconsistency that we've really seen so far, and I thought, this game summed things up pretty well, quite honestly. Had a few flashes, enough to get you excited, and enough things wrong to get you frustrated, and enough things to question. And ultimately, I feel like I've said this a lot. Some of these games are just, the season, the game within the game, the season within the season. It just feels like that's been the case a lot. And I think the hard part is you look back and you look at how well the team's played in some of these games, and they've lost enough games early on that they really shouldn't have, or you'd like for them not to have, that they really just have left themselves no margin for error. So where a loss like this tonight, where normally you might say, it's against another team that's fighting for a tournament, maybe all is not lost. I think however many lives this team had, this might have been the last one tonight, barring a unlikely win and a deep run in the Big Ten tournament where maybe you start to have some of those conversations again. But I think just, some of the other inconsistent performances made this inconsistent performance and loss that much more impactful, and probably sealed the fate to the NIT. And hopefully things there will go a little bit better, and maybe we'll give Sheehy another crack at a senior speech after a win at some point, see if there would be any difference how that might have been from tonight. But I definitely don't get the feeling this will probably be the last game at Assembly Hall this season. So I guess if there's you want to look for something positive, I guess that might be it.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, this team obviously is going to have a chance in the Big Ten tournament to do something, but I think, expecting this team to win 4 straight games on a neutral site when they couldn't win 3 straight games here at home and they really had to, even me, who tends to be the most hopeful of all the IU fans and kind of has blind loyalty and optimism sometimes, even I'm not looking at that as a realistic possibility right now. This is a really disappointing loss, for so many different reasons, for not being able to send Will out as we would have wanted to, and then just for what it represents in terms of hope being lost for the season. And I thought, Andy, you really summed it up earlier. I mean, this team has beaten Wisconsin, they've beaten Michigan, they've beaten Ohio State and Iowa at home, all ranked teams, and yet have lost at home to Northwestern, Penn State, and Nebraska. And certainly lost to Nebraska doesn't have as big a stigma on it this season because that team is really good and they're really well coached. But what would you say, Andy? Yeah, well, anyway, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. And the other thought that I had while watching this game is that's the second season in a row that we've had a really lethargic performance on senior night, and so I hope that's not going to become a thing. I seem to remember growing up that Indiana always would play well on senior night, and I have no data to back that up, but it just always seemed I never had kind of the sense of foreboding that I kind of felt today, only because of what we saw last year, when there was so much hype for that game, and it was, and Indiana just really didn't play well. And I looked back the year before, they did win on senior night, played better, but it's disappointing when you have a performance like that. And I don't know, the number one fear of humans is public speaking, so maybe having a big speech hang over the seniors' heads the entire game isn't the greatest thing for having a loose and strong performance. I don't know. Just a rough game in terms of tonight, but the final thought certainly should be one that is positive about Will Sheehy and just what this guy meant to the program. Just a tremendous competitor, and as has been said so many times, but bears saying one more time, he and Victor Oladipo really changed the culture of the program. And someone's going to have to pick up that torch and carry it next year when he's not here. And so hopefully some of the guys that we have here now are able to take that influence, take that leadership, and run with it and keep that going, because it really changed things for IU, and for us to continue on a positive trajectory and make this year just a blip and get right back into 20-win seasons and NCAA tournaments and Sweet 16s and beyond and Big Ten titles. Next year, someone's going to have to do that. And so we will see, but we'll see. He is definitely going to be missed. But hey, like Andy said, we might get to see him play, a few more games at home again this year in the NIT. Anyway, thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of the Assembly Call. Make sure you go to assemblycall.com/subscribe and get on our email list so that you get all of Andy's in-depth analysis and some of the fun stuff that we have planned for the off-season. You're not going to want to miss that. And bookmark assemblycall.com/live so that you can hit us up for the live post-game show after every game. That's all I got. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy the rest of the week. And we will talk to you Saturday night after Indiana, Michigan.